Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name's Tony Veneziano. I represent the applicant and Robert Mishkin tonight. At the last few meetings, I talked to you about the fact that I love the woods. I walk my Newfies. I went to law school in Denver. I know mountains. I respect all of that. So I come again having to oppose people who are trying to do something good, and I understand the value of trees and the value of woods, and I have this new crazy kitten that's got to be 10 months old that brought a chipmunk back yesterday, loves to bring mice, and we have coyote in the area. So I get all of that. But you're sort of here as the parent for the town to make a reasonable decision on what's going on. So I didn't come with a presentation, but I want to respond to a few things and just get this on the record and we see where it goes. So, with respect to the statement that we want to preserve 51 acres, you've got 32, 33 that you own that we're not getting that you can preserve. We're going to get 17. We're going to disturb about 11. You're going to end up with 40-ish out of 50 acres that is going to be as it is now, and we're going to replant some of ours. We talked about the fact that the building was settled on a plateau, so there's going to be trees above it. We've offered at the last planning board meeting we were at, in response to the chairman's request, to put in a walkway. And then, to my amazement, my client, after the last meeting, in which he was quite upset, turns around and proffers to provide $100,000 worth of tree planting because he wants to support this village. That didn't come from anyone but him. So I think there will be a fair amount of open space, a lot of trees, and also, it's not new to anyone in this village that these trees were coming down. We've redesigned it to eliminate hundreds of trees that we were going to take down, and it's back down to around 1,800. And this is not new. It may be new to you, but it's not new. Second thing, this is a project about senior housing, benefiting seniors. And there's federal regulations, there's a prior federal lawsuit dealing with this. So what people do is they walk up here and they say, we're not against senior housing. We'd like to go to a place where it'll take at least 20 years to get environmental approvals. Now, I didn't realize what was going on here in this village. And I'm doing this 35 years. About 2.5 years ago, a prominent attorney came to my office. I didn't know he was sent to me, but I know it now. He said, would you like to have your client buy my client's property on Radio Circle? I said, for what? He said, for an assisted living building. I said, I've already got zoning and 2 environmental finding statements. Why would I do that? Well, you should do that. You're going to have a hard time. Now, you've got a village attorney that has a relationship at this other go-to site. That village attorney has consistently made interpretations on legal documents outside the scope of his authority and provided advice to the planning board. While it may have been fair, certainly tell them that they could take their time. We spent 12 to 15 months looking at the walls for this site at the planning board. Now there's deliberate and there's just dead stuck in the mud. You need to see through this because courts are going to see through this. Third, prior approvals. You know, it was very interesting. One of the last speakers said, didn't mean to say it, but he said there was really, really a hard look. I mean, the argument that's been made by our side, and Mark Miller's back there from my firm who did most of these applications, there were very few people that appeared at these hearings. I'd say, Mark, what happened last night? He said, and there was nobody there, nobody there, nobody there. That doesn't mean the lead agency didn't look at all of these issues. And there were, as you just heard, a lot of letters written into the record and a lot of scrutiny. And there were 3 statements of findings made, 1 by this board, 2 by the planning board. So this has been fully reviewed, this notion that you have to think about stormwater. We've been thinking about it for a decade. Then we move to your recent approval on March 13th. You make a vote to approve an option agreement, fully negotiated with Paul Hastings, significant law firm in the city. We wanted to close in December. Village attorney's position was, you have to give us a general release. I was like, Whitney, nobody ever gives anybody a general release. You're giving up all of your cards on the hope you're going to sign an option agreement. We were ready to close in December. Because of that issue, we didn't close. Eventually, we struck an accord with you. There was a request for another $350,000, which we acquiesced to close the option agreement deal. You then vote consistent with that, and then all of you fine people shut up. And so we feel there's a little bit of passion on our side, just like there's passion on your side. And I respect your passion, but some of it, they need to hear both sides, and they need to make a fully informed decision, because we have a fully negotiated agreement. I've incorporated that. Now, you also have the financial side. You have a purchase price, you've taken extension money per month from us, you've taken my client's other property, and you have the real estate taxes. You have all that on yours, and you have all of the walking paths and preservation of this 51 acres that's going to take place also. So you can keep all of it, not approve it, and then fight through the coming litigation. Or you can make the best of this, work with us. The client has evidenced by his proffer on the trees, is willing to work with you. You should also know that this board established the zoning for this use at this site. We complied with it, then we cut it by 55%. We complied with it, the planning board approved it. We cut it by 55%, we're at the planning board for final site plan approval. You should also know that the village is a joint applicant at the New York City DEP with us. They're putting their weight behind this application. We've been pursuing that. They look at primarily stormwater. They've redesigned it to improve the runoff conditions, to holding things back. It's taking time, but they're ready to go forward, and you're an applicant, which I think a court will look at. You know, you've been telling us you're going to approve it, you set up zoning to approve it, you gave us environmentals to approve it, you fully negotiated a contract, you process this with DEP, you approve a resolution, 12 people come out, and I don't know how many people in this village, forgive me, 12, 15,000? There's 100 people here. And I support what they're doing, village-wide and in this area. I think you can accomplish their goals in this area without ruining 2 or 3 developers, which I'll get into a second. Now, there's got to be some reasonable solution. You're going to find out, but 3 law firms, spearheaded by one, have presented you with a notice of claim. Okay, I don't have a book to go through, a child's book, but I have this thing. Okay, and so this is a notice of claim that will serve everybody up there, the planning board, et cetera, and it's looking for $50 million in damages. That's not HFC, that's not what I do. I'm here to make deals, but if you want to, someone could read this out loud and see if anybody sleeps, because it's got behind it, it's got this notion that this applicant is not being treated fairly. Whatever the law may be, there's concepts of equity, and this applicant is not being treated fairly. And it's not being treated in good faith. On the 13th of March, it's a go. Few people say something, and these aren't even new or novel notions. At the planning board, chairman says, Tony, and he doesn't even know me. He said, because I haven't been here, he said, Tony, would your client consider jibing with this new effort in the village and give us a walking path? I said, we'll give you a walking path, and we'll find you parking spaces, and we'll talk to Curtis Instruments, because they're giving us our rear access for construction. We're also going to start the site through their site, to make sure that people can use this, especially on the weekends. They have a ton of parking there. Now, this also, look, this is a little bit unfair. I don't know how the village board thinks, and I know you all want to stop this, but this is going to Channel 12 and CBS. This is not a small move. Not approving this is not a small move. And I'm not the litigator, and I'm hoping at the end of this, you deliberate and decide to go forward. Now, just for the 3 truths or lies. This is not a new application. You have an application, you have an entity. That entity could be merged into a joint venture. It's all the same, and it has continued to move forward. So the current applicant is going to be in a venture with Town and Country, with Mr. Michigan. It's not a new application. It does not have to be looked at anew. Then he talked about this notion that no one opposed this. So on the one hand, that doesn't mean that the lead agency doesn't have to look at issues, which they did. Then he went on to provide evidence that a whole series of serious people reviewed it. And the planning board still voted to adopt these statements of findings, which is the end of the environmental process. They sit there, the judge looks at that, they said, well, that was done, what happened with that? That's all done. And in there, if you read them, you're gonna see they looked at trees, they looked at bats, they looked at stormwater, they looked at traffic, they looked at visual impacts. They approved it, and we cut it 55%. And they're still torturing us at that board. Now, the notion that it took so long has a few things going for it. One is the sort of natural depression. The 06 to 09 thing happened, and then the economy sort of dipped some. So there's some time there. But there also has been, there was one decision that was made on the advice of counsel and your engineer, where they decided to, the lease agreement between us talked about site plan approval, we were going to close and take title. And it specifically said that we did not have to wait for DEP approval, or you were not going to put DEP in front of us. That was changed during the process. That's why we had 10 or 11 lease agreements, because DEP is notorious for being slow, glacially slow. They're just not in the development business. That's one of the reasons you're a co-applicant with us. They want to know that this village is behind this, and you have been. So that's part of the reason it's taken so long. We have a client, and then you want to talk about the developer and take this smack at the developer. So this is one of the most preeminent developers in Manhattan right now, doing all sorts of wonderful work, looking at some other things here. Doesn't have a history in assisted living, but we have an operator that does, that we're bringing in. And they'll do a top flight job, and they want to build this now. Now, I didn't come up here with a presentation, and I apologize if I was too passionate, but there is the potential for harm here for both sides. We welcome any dialogue, and if not, it'll be going in the other direction, starting with the federal lawsuit, to see just to see what a judge, says. And I think there's a way for you to deliberate and understand what's being said here, come up with ways throughout the village to pursue this, and take your piece out of this project, which we've already proffered, and still get the financial benefits, and check off the fact that you're promoting senior housing. Because when we talked to that judge about you throwing up this radio circle city project that's going to take forever to get approved, it's not going to go very far. There's a mandate to put senior housing in this town. So thank you for listening. I appreciate your time.